John Diddy Combs is making headlines for its never-before-seen footage of the music mogul in the days before his arrest. Now, Combs is threatening legal action against the streamer for airing the unauthorized footage. Behind the series is Combs' longtime rap rival 50 Cent and director Alexandria Stapleton.
How did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figured most journalists would not disclose this.
What if everything we've been told about hip-hop's darkest chapter was a carefully constructed lie? What if the shootings that took Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. weren't tragic accidents of a rap war gone wrong, but calculated business moves disguised as street beef? Right now, investigators are reopening files that were supposed to stay buried forever. New testimonies are emerging. Secret recordings are surfacing.
Shouldn't have said nothing. You know what I'm saying? Shouldn't have said nothing.
And at the center of it all, a web of allegations so explosive that they could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the music industry's most powerful players. This isn't just about two unsolved murders anymore. This is about an empire built on silence, a cover-up that spans 3 decades, and the question nobody wants to answer: how many people in positions of power knew exactly what was happening and did nothing to stop it? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will change how you see hip-hop forever. Let's rewind to 1995. Hip-hop is exploding into the mainstream, and 2 labels are battling for supremacy. On the West Coast, Death Row Records is printing money with Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and their newest star, Tupac Shakur. On the East Coast, Bad Boy Entertainment is rising fast with Puff Daddy at the helm and the Notorious B.I.G. as his golden goose. But here's what the glossy magazine covers didn't show you. Behind the scenes, this wasn't just friendly competition. This was war, corporate war. And in war, casualties are inevitable. Industry insiders who were there describe a climate of paranoia and power plays. Record executives weren't just signing artists, they were building armies. And the diss tracks, the public feuds, the magazine interviews where artists threatened each other, that wasn't just marketing, that was psychological warfare designed to dominate the narrative and destroy the competition.
Now, a court is deciding the hip-hop mogul's fate. And if he's found guilty, it's possible he'll be extending his prison stay for life.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Multiple sources have claimed that the real turning point wasn't any single diss track or public confrontation, it was money. Specifically, the realization that Death Row was pulling in revenue that Bad Boy couldn't match, and that Tupac Shakur, fresh out of prison and angrier than ever, was becoming an unstoppable cultural force. So what do you do when your empire is threatened? When the competition isn't just beating you, they're potentially destroying everything you've built. According to explosive testimonies that have emerged in recent years, some people allegedly decided that if they couldn't win in the charts,
I told you you can't trust these. Now Puffy done killed Tupac, man.
They'd win by any means necessary. September 1996, Las Vegas. Tupac Shakur is shot 4 times in a drive-by. 6 days later, he's gone. The official story: gang retaliation for a casino fight. Open and shut, right? Not even close. In 2009, a recorded police interview with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a high-ranking gang member, drops a bombshell that law enforcement sat on for over a decade. In that tape, Keefe D doesn't just admit to being in the car the night Tupac was shot, he names names. Specifically, he alleges that Sean Puff Daddy Combs offered significant money to anyone who could eliminate key death row figures. According to Keefe D's account, he attended a party where Combs allegedly expressed his frustration with the West Coast rivalry and made it clear he'd pay handsomely for violence against Suge Knight and anyone closely associated with him. Keefe claims an associate named Eric Zip Martin was the middleman who supposedly delivered the payment, though Keefe says Zip kept the cash for himself. Now, let's be crystal clear. These are allegations. Combs has consistently denied any involvement in violence, and these claims have never been proven in court. But here's what makes this so explosive. Multiple independent sources have corroborated parts of Keefe D's story over the years.
Y'all need to come buy my book, Compton is a Street Legend. It's a good read, man. It's nothing but the truth.
We're not talking about one person making claims for attention. We're talking about a pattern of testimonies that align in disturbing ways. But it gets darker. 6 months after Tupac's death, Biggie is in Los Angeles, despite warnings from his own team about West Coast safety. March 9th, 1997. He's leaving a party when a car pulls up and shots ring out. Biggie dies within the hour. Now here's where the conspiracy theories shift from speculation to something more concrete. Recent document releases suggest that investigators found connections between both shootings, not just in timing, but in execution style and the networks involved. Former LAPD detective Russell Poole spent years investigating Biggie's murder, and before his death in 2015, he made claims that were largely dismissed at the time, but are now getting renewed attention. Poole alleged that off-duty police officers may have been involved, and that there were institutional efforts to suppress certain lines of investigation. He claimed evidence mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses were intimidated, and that leads pointing toward bad boy connections were actively discouraged. Was Poole paranoid, or was he onto something the system didn't want exposed?
Another example of how incomplete the investigation is and how they have tried everything or done everything to avoid the truth in the matter.
Here's where this story transforms from unsolved murders into something far more sinister. Because if these allegations are even partially true, it means dozens, maybe hundreds, of people knew what happened and stayed silent for nearly 3 decades. Let's talk about the money trail. After Tupac's death, death row records began to crumble. Legal battles, financial mismanagement, and Suge Knight's legal troubles sent the label into a death spiral. By 2006, Death Row filed for bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Bad Boy Entertainment, it exploded. Puff Daddy expanded into fashion, spirits, media, building a multi-$100 million empire. Financial analysts who've examined this period note something interesting. The elimination of death row as a competitive force opened up market opportunities that Bad Boy was perfectly positioned to exploit.
Orlando, not to tell nobody, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I said, on this type of can't be telling nobody. That's the only way you're gonna stay free.
One industry economist who studied hip-hop's business evolution calls the timing remarkably fortuitous for East Coast labels. But the money trail isn't just about record sales. It's about the network of people who allegedly helped ensure that investigations went nowhere. We're talking about lawyers who got paid enormous retainers to make problems disappear, private investigators who were hired to muddy the waters, media connections that helped control the narrative. And then there are the witnesses who went silent, not witnesses who refused to talk, witnesses who were talking and then suddenly stopped. One death row security staffer who initially cooperated with investigators later recanted everything, moved to another state, and refused all further contact. A Bad Boy intern who claimed to have information about suspicious meetings suddenly left the industry entirely and disappeared from public view.
He used his volatility to control his inner circle.
I'm a savage! Oh!
His employees knew his fits of rage well.
Were these people threatened, paid off, or did they simply realize that speaking up would cost them more than staying quiet? Recent document leaks suggest that federal investigators had far more information than they acted on. Files that should have triggered deeper investigations were marked inactive. Tips that came from credible sources were filed away without follow-up. And when Biggie's family sued the LAPD for negligence, the case dragged on for years before being dismissed on technicalities. This isn't just institutional incompetence, this is what systemic protection looks like. September 2023. 27 years after Tupac's murder, Keefe D is arrested and charged. Why now? Why after all this time did authorities suddenly decide to act on information they've had for over a decade? Some say it's because Keefe D became too public, doing interviews and writing a memoir where he detailed his involvement.
I ain't killed nobody, never did ever kill nobody. They don't have no evidence against me. Came and put me in Las Vegas.
But others suggest something else, that his arrest is part of a larger strategy. By focusing the public's attention on the shooters, the street-level players, authorities may be ensuring that questions about who ordered the hits never get seriously examined in court. Keefe D's trial, if it happens, will likely focus on whether he was in the car and whether he played a role in the shooting. What it probably won't do is put Sean Combs or other industry figures on the stand. Legal experts note that prosecuting someone for the actual violence is far easier than proving conspiracy charges against powerful figures with resources for high-level legal defense. But here's the twist. Combs' recent legal troubles have cracked open a door that's been sealed for decades. In September 2024, he was arrested on federal charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking, allegations he denies and is fighting in court. But his arrest has triggered a cascade of renewed scrutiny on everything else in his past. Prosecutors in the Tupac case have reportedly shared files with investigators, looking at other aspects of Combs' history. Former associates are being re-interviewed, documents that were buried are being re-examined, and suddenly people who stayed quiet for 30 years are starting to wonder if their silence still protects them, or if it makes them accomplices. There's talk of immunities being offered, plea deals being considered, and whispers that some former insiders are ready to tell everything.
They will refer to me as Wild King Nights. I would have to go and prep that hotel room.
If it means avoiding legal exposure themselves. One legal analyst who's followed both cases closely predicts that whether or not Combs is convicted on his current charges, the real explosion will come from civil suits and testimonies that emerge from people trying to save themselves. We're watching a dam start to crack, they observe, and when it breaks, it's not just going to flood one case, it's going to expose an entire system. But let's zoom out for a moment, because this story isn't really just about two murders or one mogul. It's about an industry that created an environment where violence became a business tool and then protected the people who used it. How many other artists were threatened? How many other beefs were manufactured for publicity and then got out of control? How many times did label executives push their artists into dangerous situations because conflict sold records? This is the real scandal. An entire generation of artists was used as ammunition in corporate battles. And when some of them died as a result, the system that created the environment closed ranks and made sure the truth stayed buried. So here we are in 2024, nearly 3 decades later, finally starting to peel back the layers of what really happened. Keefe D sits in jail awaiting trial. Sean Combs fights federal charges in a separate case.
Now, it was this documentary that claimed, which we know wasn't true.
Yeah, check this out. We don't talk about things that are nonsense. We don't even entertain nonsense, my brother.
And investigators quietly share files between jurisdictions, building connections that should have been made in 1996. Will we ever get the full truth? That depends on whether the people who know what happened decide that protecting themselves is more important than protecting the secrets. It depends on whether prosecutors have the courage to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it implicates powerful, influential figures. But here's what we already know for certain. Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. were extraordinary talents whose lives were cut short in violence that was preventable. An industry that profited from their rivalry failed to protect them. And a system that should have sought justice instead sought to bury the truth. The question isn't just who pulled the trigger, it's who created the environment where pulling the trigger became an option, and who made sure that everyone who might have answers stayed silent long enough for memories to fade and trails to go cold. The empire built on silence is starting to crumble, and when it falls, we're finally going to see what was hidden underneath all along. The truth is coming. The only question is the industry ready for it?